will commence the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you. So I invited a few guest speakers today, as you can probably see. I'm going to just run through my stuff real quick, and then I will pass it on to the mayor and fire chief to talk about South Fire Station and SAFER, because I know people have a lot of questions about that with the budget coming up and after our study session the other day. And then Nick is also on the line to discuss the storm drain rates that are coming up on the council meeting agenda as well. So mine's going to be super short. We don't have any November numbers yet from Department of Revenue. We should have those beginning of next week. We are close to getting the October financials out. It's taken a little longer because we're having to put the budget amendment number 3 stuff in there. The good news is once we get those financial statements out, it's going to be the best data we've seen in a while because it does contain the budget amendment information and gets them more up to date. So as we've been talking about the budget, there's been some comments made about potentially adding things back in. It's looking at first glance with the October financials, and they're not complete yet, but it does look like we will have some surplus at the end of 2020. Our expenses in the general fund are still trending way lower than the budget. So one possibility is to consider that surplus again, to add projects back into the budget that were taken out. I know there's a desire from at least one council member to keep that ending fund balance in the general fund at 2 million. So one way we could accomplish that is by using that surplus at the end of 2020 to fund some of those things, if that's what council wants to do. So I'll have actual numbers to talk about at Monday's council meeting once we have the October financials out to kind of give you an estimate on where we are and what that's looking like at the end of October and into November. And then I will be presenting one final budget amendment for the 2019 and 2020 budget at the December 14th council meeting. Unfortunately, I can't get it on the next council meeting agenda just because I don't have the October numbers yet, and it's best to wait closer to the end of the year to know where we're at to make those final adjustments. And it's only going to include things that have to be done by the end of the year to make sure our funds are in our budget authority and to make sure none of the funds are going to be in the negative at the end of the year. So I'm expecting just maybe a handful of things. It's not going to be very big. Unfortunately, with only one meeting in December, it might need to get approved in just one reading, but we'll get the information out so you can see it ahead of time. And like I said, it should be pretty minimal on whatever adjustments we have to do. So that's about it for me. Do you guys have any questions on the finance side?
Angie, are you going to, at the next council meeting, hand out or on a piece of paper have what council members have requested like you've done in the past?
I could do that. So we're working off that big Excel spreadsheet right now of stuff that's actually in the budget. But yeah, I have a page of notes from the study session that I could print up for everybody and get out there.
Because I'm just thinking that it might be easier that way to vote on it, like what we've done in the past,
Sure.
where we just kind of went down the list.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, if that's it, I think we'll turn it over to Mayor. Do you want to start since you just sent that email out about the SAFER grant?
Sure. I will ask Mike Tyree to speak to some of this as well. The email that I sent you, it was the same one that I sent in, I think, September. So not surprisingly, nobody except Angie could find it again because it didn't even have a title that really looked right. So I personally spent a lot of time looking for that. So anyway, on the email portion of that, toward the bottom, I am talking about the numbers coming up. And one of the things you know, the EMS levy and the EMS utility fee are different than, for instance, um, the storm drain fee. The storm drain fee is fixed to the property and doesn't change unless you change it. Whereas these other two things are tied to homes and number of properties that have homes on them that have utilities. So when we're figuring how much money we're going to have, it's one of the things we can look at. How many new homes are being built? And each one of those will pay the utility fee and will pay the EMS levy. And then Angie has said the EMS levy, when, and I'm assuming it will be passed, is going to be, you know, re-upped. It starts full and then over time it kind of lags a bit. So it will be actually higher than the numbers that I've given you. But basically, I figure it's going to cost about $440,000 ultimately to have the new people. And the amount of money that we are going to have from the increase in the EMS utility and the EMS levy based on the number of homes that are being built and averaging over, starting, you know, the first of next year, I put in 100 a year because I thought that was a reasonably modest number and one that will help us. But we're looking at, since we put the utility in, it's 1,000 new homes. And you figure 2 point whatever number of people are in each one of those homes. It's no wonder that we really need to look at this. And, you know, even if we didn't have the people who were being denied insurance down in the South End and the people who were, you know, frankly, having to wait longer for the ambulance or the fire truck to get to their home, we still have this influx of people who are, you know, coming to live in our community, and we have to serve them. And the first people who really start serving them, other than the sewer and water folks, are the firemen and the EMTs. They really have to be available for those new homes. So anyway, I resent that email, and you can look at it, and we can talk about it at the council meeting. It's on the agenda, the draft agenda, that John was going to lead a discussion on that. So I think that really makes sense. And I know, Mike, that you have some information to share as well on this. If you would speak to what we're looking at doing in the South End and what the grant for the first 3 years is likely to look at. And I know those things change a little every year, but it's not likely to get worse because with COVID, they're not going to make it more difficult. So if you could speak to that, and you're muted right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me out here. And I just, you know, I'll repeat basically what the mayor says. You know, that area down there is growing tremendously. We've seen a lot of homes down there. You all know I dabble a little bit in real estate, and it's just been amazing to seeing all the foundations that are going up. One of the things that we all need to remember is our manpower hasn't changed since we brought on the last Safer Grant people. One of the things I did was go back on the 2020 calendar and just pull up how many times we're only at 4 firefighters for a 24-hour period, how many firefighters we are in a 24-hour period, and how many 6. And for a 4-man shift, which is our minimum staffing right now, just this year is 45%. 5-man shift is 41%. And that's why I was asking for additional help. Just alone, if we took the ISO rating out of this and the situation that's occurring down there for the insurance, I know people don't want to hear it, but we are shorthanded, dramatically shorthanded, and we're having a hard time covering the calls that we're having. We're doubling, we're tripling, and when I have a 4-man shift, I just don't have the personnel. You know, there's been a lot of times where, you know, just this year, I sat at someone's house with them as a family, waiting for an ambulance to arrive. It was 30 minutes before we get an ambulance over to them. And this gentleman was having a seizure. I know you guys don't have to sit there. We do. And it's really hard on us when we can't help them the way we want because we don't have the manpower to do it. And that's just the medical side. You know, I could go on about the fire and how many people we need to have for a structure fire. But as it is right now, 314 days out of the year, we're only at a 4 or 5-man shift. So we're just shorthanded, period. What came in play was the ISO rating. That one came in. Now we're ending up in situations where some of these people are getting their insurance rates jacked up quite a bit. And I know there's been discussions that maybe that's not true, but you can call Mike McGregor, you can call Farmers Insurance. They'll verify that this is happening and this will be happening. On top of that, so how are we going to fix the problem? SAFER grant. Now, are we going to get SAFER grant? For the year 2021, the president did drop some of the funding out of there. It went down by a quarter. It went from about 710 million, and they're dropping it down to 688 million. So that means they're not going to be supplying as much money out there for the SAFER grant. Now, the other thing we got is the utility rate, which I know everyone hates, and it's there. But if you go back and look at that study that was done in 2018, they predicted all this. They said that we were going to be shorthanded. They showed that we probably have to go down that path. But these are all things that is happening to us. I don't have an answer for where the funding's coming other than the SAFER grant, utility. Hopefully the levy passes and doesn't hurt us. But the funding we're going to have to figure out. And I don't think we can keep going down this path and keep being behind on manpower. The station, there's questions about that one. I'm a true believer that building was built to be added on. I think that's the path we need to go. I know someone mentioned modular units. I've seen modular units. They will hold up for maybe 20, 30 years, but there's going to be a lot of maintenance on them. Usually those roofs are 20-year roofs. They're only going to last 10 years. You can drive around Ocean Shores and look at these homes. We'll be constantly putting money into them. So I think the best thing to do is add on to the station and do the backside there as it was planned in the beginning. Now what I did was, you know, I'm not a contractor, I'm not a professional on this stuff, but I'm thinking it's gonna be about $400 a square foot in putting this building up and just framing it. Now, that doesn't come out to the 420, but it comes out to 288. We do have some of the money left over in the GMT fund, correct, Angie? So we'll have to come up with a balance on that portion of it. But then on top of that, we'll have to think about exhaust system to remove the diesel. We'll have to think about a sprinkler system. We got to think about all the permits. We need to think about furniture, appliances, everything that would need to go in to support these guys while they're there down there at the station. And that's why I came up with that number. I'm thinking it's going to get us pretty close to where we need to be. But again, I'm not one of those, I'm not a contractor. That's why I'd like to go out for a consultant and have him figure out the numbers. And at least we start there and find out what it is. And then we may have to come back to the council and tell you where we're at on the situation. But at the end of the day, I don't think we can just keep pushing this down the road. I think we need to start looking at it seriously about manning the station down there, helping those people. I heard someone say that was their choice to live down there. I disagree with that. This is a city. Everyone should be paying for the same amount if they're living within the city limits. And that was just I just couldn't believe I was hearing that. That's pretty much where I'm at right now. So the plan I had in my mind was, yes, this coming year, we start looking at doing the construction, start moving forward on that, at least getting the living quarters started down there. We go out and we apply for the SAFER grant that comes out in spring. We don't find the results out until fall. And then we reassess at that point what we're going to do about funding the firefighters. And then we just keep moving forward from there in 2022, 2023. We look at that if we have to go down that and wait that long. But, you know, I don't think we should wait until 2022 or the next budget cycle, because we're just going to keep getting further and further behind. And we're lacking on our service out there.
Just a second, Bob. I was going to add one thing before I forget it, and my forgetter is getting to be really good. The numbers that I gave you are without us raising anything. We're not raising the utility. We're not doing anything more than what we're doing now. We're just looking at with the number of homes being built and then kind of ratcheting that down so that we're not depending on something that's not going to happen. We would have enough money to do this, because the way the SAFER grant works is they pay a portion of it the first year, and then they pay a portion of it the second year, and it's generally, I think, a lesser portion, and then we take over, and by then we're at 2025, and we can take over.
If we do get the SAFER grant, the year 1 and 2, they'll cover 75% of the wages. Year 3, then they cover 35%.
Okay, great. That's good information. And that means we can have what we need. And by the time we get to where we're paying the full shot, it will be part of the budget. We won't have to go to the general fund. We won't have to do these things. And I think it's very doable. So that's part of what I'm thinking. Anyway, Bob, you have something?
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned that building was made to be added on to down there?
Yes.
Okay. Were there ever, I mean, do you know how they planned to do it? Is there some kind of schematic someplace, or?
There is a floor plan somewhere, but if you look on where the engine and the ambulance would sit in the bay, that back wall was, there's no stem wall back there because it was made to extend further towards the back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Scott, do
I'm
you have
forward all the way,
anything?
by the way.
Sorry?
I'm forward all the way, by the way. If we could start tomorrow, it'd be great.
I think so too. Scott, do you have anything to add?
No, not to this, not to Mike's segment.
Okay. Or to mine. You're welcome to add to mine too. No, okay. John.
I'm okay with moving forward with what we've got in this budget right now. Where my concern is that for the council to be aware of what they're moving forward, because when we did the SAFER grants, and I know the SAFER grants have changed dramatically of how they're administered and have the payback, the council didn't have a clear pathway forward once it came. Then we had that 1 year that was a really tough year. What are we going to do? So I'd just like to make sure that everyone's in there. And my concern is that since we got it in a big discussion about percentages of increases, that you're going to be presenting huge percentage of increases. And it might be the right thing. We might have the money to do that, which is fine. But I just want, if the council wants to move forward, that they understand what we're moving forward with and how much it's going to cost after the Safer Grant part of it's gone. Because they're people, I don't think the vision should be that we'll just lay them off if we don't have the money. I mean, I think it should be that we have a path forward, and financially, looking at revenue, it looks like that we do have that. But I think I'm just worried when we had the discussion on everyone being concerned about Nick's presentation, and we're talking about $1 and we're talking about a percentage. And then what's that going to do when we start talking about the numbers that you're going to be asking for?
And,
Okay,
and I understand that, and please don't understand the 75, 75, 35 is for the 2020. They do not announce until the Safer Grant is announced what the exact percentage. So I get what you're saying, but we are also down the road on getting those firefighters. I mean, we wouldn't be getting them until we knew if we were getting the Safer Grant in fall or end of next year. Should we stop the process of at least getting it ready by getting that building ready? I'd like to see the building get started at the very least, knowing that when the time comes that we can be having this discussion all over again and hopefully moving forward with some firefighters. But to hold off on construction, that put us another year behind. Does that make sense to you?
No, it makes sense. But we just came off a call that we were talking about what type of tent we could have.
Yeah.
And if we could re-engineer it, we would have re-engineered the tent. So we're going to have that discussion when it comes to whatever your presentation is. So I just want to have the discussion so we can start having the discussion up front and maybe have a study session after the end of the year, just so it's not a surprise and everybody's on board. Because I do believe that we're growing and that we do need to have additional coverage from police and fire, and it makes sense to have another fire station. I just am concerned that people say that they want to have the stuff and they're not willing to pay for it.
Yeah, the other flip side of the coin is, and I know it's a small percentage of people down there, but if you want to play the game of numbers, is it really fair to those people to have to pay exaggerate amount of insurance money versus maybe what it's going to cost them monthly at the end of the day if we have to go down that road? I mean, it's a
I agree with the position that you said, that we're one big city. I mean, that because I live on a canal, that I think the city should be responsible for working with canal. If I live down at the end of there, I expect to have fire service. I mean, we're part of Ocean Shores, and everyone should equally share, is my view.
Yeah, so do I. Trust me.
I just want to reiterate what the mayor said earlier too. I don't want people to get confused and think that we're asking for more money or higher rates or anything of that nature and kind of blur it with the storm drain. Her email lays out a funding plan that doesn't include any rate increases or anything like that. So it's just basically a rate plan that brings in more money as we grow as a city, and it's not increasing what people are already paying. So I just wanted to clarify that again, so it doesn't look like we're looking for more money or raising the utility or anything like that, because that's not the proposal.
It needs to be in big letters.
I'll go back and resend the email with bigger letters on that part.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, just tell them to go drive around Ocean Shores and look how many foundations are going off.
I did that drive, looking for at the storm, and it's pretty amazing. Anyway, I think that's pretty much what we have, Angie, on that subject.
Mayor, could you also, or Chief, could you send the fire study out again? Because I think, to the point that a lot of things that we're talking about now, that was in that study. And I know that we were surprised when we saw that, but it's happening. So I think it's a fact-based document that would also help be part of that conversation.
Definitely, because I went through it again today, and basically all you gotta do is look at page 25 through 47, and it literally spells out what's happening today. I mean, it totally explains everything, and I was pretty impressed how they came up with such a summary. So yeah, I will send that over to the mayor.
Can I add
Sarah?
just
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask Sarah, is it online? And if not, can we just put it online? Or I'm not muted, okay.
Oh, you're not muted. I'll
Okay.
double check if it isn't, but if it is, and if it isn't, we can definitely put it online.
Okay, I think some people may want paper copies anyway. Bob?
Yes. One of the things I think that maybe we need to think of, or I think of at least, is that I have spent a 45-year career with taking bits and pieces of information and funneling them into recommendations at the end of a report. Do we, when we send studies out and that sort of thing and people look at them, do we make recommendations at the end that are clear cut to help them? People a lot of times just look past all these statistics and they get blurred. And if we have a set of recommendations that we're trying to drive at, maybe we need to start doing that if we don't.
If you read this utility report, Bob, it does, and it even gives options of what we should do as a city, what's our options. And it talks about manpower and funding and all that. So there is a nice little summary page at the end of this.
I want to
And maybe we need to highlight that when we send it out.
Yeah, and I want to point out too that people might get alarmed when they read that study because there were the options of bringing in no firefighters or 3 firefighters with rates attached, utility rates attached to those. So when you look at that study, it's going to say your rate needs to be X amount to fund this many more positions, but that was based on our count at that time. So that study does not have any growth factor in there. So just keep that in mind, because I don't want people to say, oh, if we add 3 firefighters, it's going to cost us another $4 a month in utility tax, because those were our water connections at that time, but they've grown substantially. So just keep that in mind.
Would
We
we
need to say
want,
what we need.
because there are charts in there that does that. And
Yeah.
so would we be better off just highlighting and pasting this on a whole new document and taking?
No, transparency, send it out as is, and then maybe we do a write-up of explaining some of the differences.
And where
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
now compared to where we were.
Yeah, because I think if you take anything out of it, that won't work.
Yeah. We'd have to have a new study done to edit it at this point.
I agree. And we're really talking the difference between, I think the study was done in 2016, probably with 2015 numbers. And then we're trying to go all the way up to 2025. So it does make a difference. That's all I got.
All right. If there are no more questions on that subject, I think, Chief, if you want to, you don't need to sit around for Nick unless you want to.
No, I'll plug out here.
All right.
And Mayor, I'll send over that utility report to you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Mike.
So,
All right. Nick, you're up.
Yeah, just a quick note. It is on FilePro. I sent the link over to Sarah just so that it can be put somewhere else if need be. But that was my contribution to that last segment. So what I wanted to do is just touch base with everybody. And, obviously when we had our study session at the beginning of the week, there was a lot of information that was rolled out. And one of the things that we did talk about is the new rate model for stormwater. And so, we briefly went through that during the study session, and then I emailed that out afterwards. And so ultimately, if you've had a chance to go through the council packet, you'll see that, during that study session, we came up, a question was asked about what is the minimum recommendation. And so we took a bunch of things out and included that minimum recommendation in the rate ordinance for the upcoming council meeting. And so what I was hoping to do is just get some feedback if we're on target, if we're out in left field, if ultimately, if we're going in the right direction, and I guess kind of leave it free flowing from there.
Well, I've got just a question because it keeps coming up. So is there an actual study that that you have done for stormwater rates? Or is that a part of the water?
No, is the short answer. The long answer is, as it relates to our rate adjustment that we're doing right now, the information that I put together was effectively the same thing that's done from a study standpoint. We identify the work that we want to do, how much that's going to cost, and we make the adjustment based on what we want to do and how much that's going to cost. And so I guess the technical answer is yes, we have done a little bit of a study on that, but in comparison to the water system plan, we have not done a stormwater plan like we did for the water system. And so the way I see this shaking out is, assuming the stormwater plan is included in the rate structure, we go through that process, we establish the stormwater plan. As part of that, that's going to identify a capital improvement plan. And so the steps that occur from there, the capital improvement plan is what Angie and I took to say, okay, how does that compare with our future revenue needs? And at that point in time, we're looking at revenues and expenditures and determining what the appropriate rate structure needs to be to accomplish the capital improvement plan and the maintenance and operation needs based on the study information. We can also pay a consultant like we've done with FCS in the past, but in my opinion, they're not overly complicated. But if that increases the belief that the number's right, I'm happy to hand that off to a financial consultant that will run those numbers. So it's 6 one way, half dozen to me. But the short answer to your question is no, there's not a formal plan. We've kind of done the analysis with the projects that we have, but we do intend to do the full meal deal after the adjustment.
And could I add to that? The way we charge people, though, has been adjudicated in that lawsuit that we won. So the methodology is sound. It's just what's new for each period of time that is different.
Yeah, no, I agree with, how you presented it at the last meeting. This is what the cost is. This is what you need. And I think that, that we've always talked about having the different departments, stand alone, from a revenue and expense. And I think it's really clear. I like your spreadsheet, that if you don't want to do something, you just take it off, and that's a number. And to me, that's more fact-based than having a discussion about a percentage, which I always get concerned when we're talking about percentages versus actual dollars. So I think you're, in my mind, you're on the right track.
One thing that I am curious about is, from a work standpoint, I think I identified kind of that baseline minimum, or what I'm identifying as a minimum. I know that there are other areas of concern that people may want to consider incorporating in, and so as with that spreadsheet, it's very simple to just make the adjustment. So a perfect example is in the minimum recommendation, I didn't include pennywort, the pennywort harvesting. And so I know there was concerns in this recent year about chemical application to the waterways. And so the desire to get away from chemical application. So obviously we're not at that point right now, and that's part of what we're going to have to dive into. But we do know that the pennywort harvesting is an option, that we can utilize the mechanical harvesting approach and limit chemical usage, specifically targeting pennywort. And so that is an option to address some of the other concerns that I know that have been floating around out there. And it's pretty simple to add that in if that is a desire to kind of approach the waterways in a more holistic approach. So, and I haven't received any feedback one way or the other on that, but I expect probably Monday night we'll be able to talk about that a little bit further.
Bob, what do you think?
I think I like the colors the other night. No, I think I agree with what you talked about earlier, that we need to get rid of that thinking of percentage rates, because that fools everybody into thinking things are much worse than they are, and go back to the talking in terms of dollars, that sort of thing. I think that I hope we can arrive at that happy medium between what is people consider outrageous to what's palatable, because that's a real political thing. We're on the right track. Next on the right track.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the whole goal is that we want the system to work as best as it can, and that's my target. That's our team's target. From an operational standpoint, that is the absolute goal. So, and it takes money to operate systems that, decay and fail over time. So that's the target there. I think at the end of the day, I don't know if there's an impression that, what's the word I'm looking for, that I get something out of it, or that our teams get something out of it. That we really don't. I mean, we just get more work. So it's kind of funny that I'm arguing and asking for more work, but at the end of the day, I know the system needs it. So that's our target. That's our focus.
All right. Any more questions for Nick?
Not for Nick, but I have some questions.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
Okay, so this goes back to the budget and passing the budget. Okay, so when the budget comes up and we finally get everything done, we vote, and as long as you got 4 votes, the budget passes.
Correct.
So what triggers the super majority feature of when we do a budget amendment?
I think the legal criteria says that if you're reducing expenditures in any fund, that it requires a supermajority vote.
Just in that fund?
Yeah, I can send it out. I think that's what it says. I know we've talked to Brent about it and it's in a statute, but I can forward that on. I'm pretty sure that's what it says, but it has to do with reducing the expenditures in funds and requiring a supermajority.
I thought it was expending more.
No. So
Okay.
I'll send it out. Yeah.
Why do you think I mean, just out of curiosity, why do you think that it would be in reduction? And
So
why do you think that that's what they would require that for?
I think it's to avoid like a council just slashing a budget, just personnel and all that stuff.
Okay.
But
Hurting the city. In other words, hurting the city.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because I think that would, because we had a proposal from a citizen talking about every every budget or everything we voted on would be a super majority, which to me isn't how it works, because then the minority would be controlling of what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so I think just from a clarification, because if we pass the budget, it's simple majority, and then what are the rules? I think it would just be easier if we were just clear to exactly
Sure.
what it was. And then my next question was, do we have in the budget, and I think you guys said yes, but all the rate studies that we're going to need to have in the next year, that we've budgeted for those?
That would be more of, are you talking about utility rates?
Well, all the things that you typically would put together as a study, you know, like if we're going to do the water plan, I don't know whatever ones, if we need to do another fire plan or whatever. Do we have all those things in the budget?
We do not have a fire one. I know that for sure, but I'm going to defer to Nick on the utility studies. I'm going to try.
So we do have a little bit of money in set aside for the water system plan update, which we're anticipating starting in 2022. And on the sewer side, we initiated just a capital review a couple of years ago and have not completed that yet. Just a couple of years ago, whenever that was. Bottom line is we haven't completed it yet. We did intend to, after the capital review was completed, then look at the operational side internally. But again, we haven't done that yet. So that one's not one where we would budget it. But at the end of the day, it seems like there's a desire to look at, you know, FCS or have some other consulting firm in, you know, to kind of close the gap there from a dollars and cents standpoint. So bottom line, water and sewer, yes, we are moving towards that. I don't expect they're going to be done in this budget cycle, though.
Okay, I mean, because it seems like when we do the studies, they always take longer than we expect, and then they always come back with more expenses than we have money to spend on. But I think that if that's what the council wants, that we are ready to have it in the budget and proceed forward.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Let's go back to the supermajority question.
Mm-hmm.
So gear back to that. And you talked about if you are reducing a fund, then that's when it kicks in, correct?
Yeah, I actually have it up on my screen if you want me to read you the citation.
No, that just answer the simple question here.
Okay.
No, the simple
Yes,
answer here.
you're correct.
Okay. So if you had a complete budget and you had one thing sticking out there that you're reducing in, it would make sense to really pay attention to that one piece and get that hammered out before you bring the budget in, right?
So the budget is strictly a majority. So when we approve the 2021, 2022 budget, that's just a vote of 4 that's required as yes
Right.
votes. A budget amendment, yes. In the case
Okay.
you just went through in the future, what I would recommend the council do is just strike out whatever items are the contentious ones and approve the rest of it that they're comfortable with.
Yes, that would make much more sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's one way to avoid that situation in the future. At any time, council can strike out any line item of any budget or budget amendment and approve the remaining items. And then I would go in and adjust it as council approved it.
We could call that the logjam rule.
Sure.
Well, but when the vote was no, I don't think there was a particular item that they had an issue with.
No, there was
Well,
there was no
Yeah.
discussion to strike any particular item, which is something the council could have done. It just got kind of messy.
Okay.
So go back to that, John. We didn't have any one thing where we're reducing, right?
No, there were things that we were reducing. There wasn't, I don't think there was a particular item that we go, okay, if we took
Okay.
this out of the amendment, would you pass? I think it was a hard no on everything.
So Angie, is it a percentage that you're reducing something by? Is it 1% or could 50%? Just one?
Nope.
Could be
It says that if the council decreases, revokes, or recalls all or any portion of the total appropriations provided for in any one fund, it has to be a supermajority.
Okay,
So
that's interesting. It seems like you ought to have a percentage in there or something.
no percentage. It says any or all.
Okay.
I do believe the discussion when we had it around that budget amendment, John, I think it might have been you that said, well, if you don't want to approve this, are there things that you want changed? And the answer was just no, we just want to wait for the audit to get complete.
That's right. That's right. There was the audit issue.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Those were my questions.
All right. So can we talk about plans for the budget? It doesn't, so I'm assuming at Monday's council meeting, that will be the meeting that we kind of go through and council says what changes they want. And then December 14th, I'll bring back the changes, what that looks like on the budget. And then that's probably where we're going to do a third reading to approve the ordinance. Is that what you're thinking?
That's what I'm thinking, that we would go down, you'd compile a list. We'd probably throw out there, is there anything else that's not on the list, just to make sure that we're covered on that. And then we would vote, by the individual items. And I'm sure that you have looked at the numbers and what I heard at the study session, there's nothing that was suggested that would dramatically impact what we want to do for the overall budget. There might be something that's added and it's just going to reduce our ending balances, but there's nothing that the budget stopper in my mind. I mean, I think we could actually pass almost everything that was asked for and still have a solid budget. At least my perception. So I think if we just go down that way, then we'll see how it goes.
So if we did go in and all the things that were suggested were subtracted, where would we be at in reserves? I'm sure you figured that out, Angie.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that. What I want to do as well is look at the expected surplus to see what that looks like, because Catherine made a good point that all of the things that were discussed at the study session were additional asks, but there wasn't anything that was added as a cut to kind of offset that. So
Right.
Look at where we're at with the October financials and kind of give council an estimated surplus number where it looks like we're going to end 2020. I'm guessing that the stuff that council wants added back in will fall into that surplus to keep our fund balance at the 2 million mark, which it sounds like some people want to leave it there. But I'll look at all that and bring it to Monday's meeting to talk about.
So Angie, just going back to the on the budget, because it's a 2-year budget, that and there's some things in there that I would agree that should be in the budget, but maybe don't go till year 2 when we have, and then of course we could always not do them depending on what goes on there. We really are not setting them out by in like, I'm thinking like the interpretive center. I mean, I would imagine year 2 is where they're going to need the money versus year 1 with it. But we just give a number, right?
Yeah. Yep. The interpretive center is a little tricky because we pay them in installations.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's just one number for both years for most things.
Well, and I think that one of the things that could be done would be to, if you wanted to give them more money the first year or give them all the money that we budgeted, because I only put 60,000 in. Then when we look at the second year, we could move money from the reserves, hopefully, to there, or some of the other things like, you know, if we're going to have more lid money and that sort of thing. And honestly, I think in my mind, the same with the golf course. I would love to do the golf course and get it done and you know, have it looking pristine, and it would be great. But if we shove that even to the second half of 2021, that gives us that window on what's going to happen in the next 6 months, which I think is going to be the critical part, that we want that extra money there.
I've been wondering about the library a little bit, because Keitha presented what she called a bare bones budget, didn't she?
You know, and I'm with you. I would love to give the library more money too. And I think that's another great thing that we could do in the second half of the year.
Yeah.
But she's got enough for a lot of stuff. It's just some of the new things that she wanted to do. I think it was only like $8,000 a year. It's not huge, but.
I like the idea of being able to consider for that second year, looking at taking a relook a little bit.
Yeah, one of the big things that was a highlight for the library this time was adding that capital reserve. That's new, and that was $48,000 that the library currently hasn't received in any budget. So it's a big chunk that was dedicated to giving them, you know, a bucket for capital stuff, because stuff breaks there too. They need a new roof, they need this or that. So that was a big thing for the library that we implemented in this proposed budget. That was, I think, a nice win for them.
And, you know, I appreciated that Keitha deals directly with the public, so she feels that what she is doing affects them more. But honestly, everything we do affects the public. All of the things that we want to do affected one way or another. And every department lost money. I mean, everybody could have stood up there and did a litany of what they didn't get.
Yeah.
And, you know, because I gave you guys the big stuff, but I didn't give you the little stuff. And there's a lot of it. So
just, okay, again, from the budget. Now, my understanding is that if, say, we present something to the budget and it doesn't get passed, we vote something down, that to bring that back in the budget, we have to have a supermajority to add. And so my question, because I struggle with COVID, because if you were to talk to me 3 weeks ago, you know, business is recovering, we're going in the right direction. Wow. And you talk to me this week, then, you know, it's doom and gloom. And you were very conservative when it came to budget projections as far as revenue goes. And I think that if we get a vaccine, things will dramatically change. You know, so is there maybe a way that some of the things that we could limit as far as what we're going to spend, and then come back and look from a budgeting like mid-cycle?
Yeah, so that's what we do during the mid-biennial review. You remember that big
right.
budget amendment? We did it in the middle. And that's the intent of that, is to kind of go through halfway through the budget cycle and kind of figure out, we'll update the revenues, we'll look at expenses again. We'll do that at the end of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
But I think partly, John, what you're talking about is the same thing that we did this last year. When things started looking iffy, we quit doing some things, and we didn't get projects done. And you know, there's still projects we want to do. They have meaning, but it's part of that process is to keep your eye on the ball. And if it starts sinking, then we're going to pull back, and it's just the way it's going to be. And maybe some of those projects or maybe other ones will just wait another year.
Yeah, and that's why our expenses are running so low, is because when this all happened, that was the first thing the mayor said was, we need to stop spending money until we figure out what's happening. So, and you're seeing the effect of that now. When you look at the October financials, the expenses are way under target. And it's just, we've been really careful with our spending.
But no, and I appreciate it, and that's exactly what I would expect from the city to do. And I'm just concerned that I think we need to take that approach. But then, are we going to be having this discussion about percentage of increase, because it's a percentage of increase of things that we decided not to do, not that we didn't have the money to do it. So I'm just, trying to have the balance of, and then have the flexibility of, okay, things are better, revenue's better than what we thought, we've got extra money, and here are our priority things that we want to spend our money on.
Yep.
And I absolutely agree with you, John. I think we're going to kind of have to play this year by ear and really, really watch what's going on. And if the vaccines are as wonderful as they're saying, and they're out in the early spring and all of the wonderful things we're hearing, if all of that comes to fruition, that's a whole different ballgame than if somehow they find something wrong and we're kind of pushed back again. So those are things we're going to have to think about. And part of that is I think, and maybe, you guys look at it differently, but I think part of that is you set a budget and then I need to manage it. And we need to have good communication, and you know exactly what I'm doing. And so that you're comfortable and I'm comfortable that we're doing the right thing with that money. And that's kind of part of the thing of, you have the right to set the budget, and then I have the right to spend it or not spend it. And honestly, even some of the money we're talking about, I'm with you. In the last week and a half, I'm thinking, wow, are we going to want to really start this at that point? So we need to think about those. And I was surprised to hear Eric say he thought that the part of the fire berm thing,
Fire break.
The second half was, or the 2/3, it really is, was going to be later. And that's, it gets back to communication, and we just need to all be really clear. And I know Nick is spending money on those things now. So when we talk about how much money did we put in and was it enough? Well, we're already doing this other part and paying money out right now. So the whole thing is complex.
What if we created a guideline that at our midterm look, at the end of the first year of the biennium, that when we see what the surplus is, if there is a surplus, that a certain percentage goes into reserves automatically?
Into which reserves? I mean, we got little pockets of money everywhere.
The big reserve.
Saving for this, that, or the other.
Yeah, it's kind of a moving target too, because like right now we're talking about having a surplus at the end of 2020, where if we had a policy that said we have to move it all into reserves, it council the ability to add in these projects that people want to do. So you're kind of locking yourself in.
I'm not saying all now. I'm saying
some, yeah.
Some.
But it's a good idea, but we've done it in the past where we kind of just go through when we have the surplus and say we want to do this, this, and this with it, which has worked as well. So you would just be locking yourself in. And once you put that money into reserves, you can't necessarily get it back out, is kind of an issue too.
It's sort of like the council reserve, isn't it?
Yeah, that can only be so big. But one of the things too is, like on the LTAC money, we put some rules in place, and this year, we didn't have as much money. So those rules, and one of them was that we would take a percentage of that and put it in something, I don't remember what it was. And we didn't do it because there wasn't enough money. So creating rules and then saying, oh, but we have to throw it out this year and do it this way because otherwise we can't run the convention center. Isn't
I'll withdraw the suggestion.
Hey, Bob, but remember
I
when
would
we
do
put
that,
the
I know.
$1.5 million as
Yeah.
council guideline, and then every budget we've had, they want to go below the 1.5.
But didn't I say this past year, I recall that I thought, why don't we go to a $2 million reserve? And everybody went
Oh,
crazy.
no.
Thought I was
Right
nuts.
no, maybe it'll be different this year, but you know, we
Yeah.
put guidelines in, and you know, in both past budgets, since we've had it in there, we've had motions to go below the 1.5.
Yeah.
And another thing I would point out is the council, when we had the Great Recession starting, they had $2 million in reserves and it just disappeared like water really fast. And that's really scary. And then they went into debt besides.
Yeah.
It was an anomaly. Maybe it won't happen again even in our lifetime, but maybe it will.
Yeah. God, we got to hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
On that cheery note.
Yeah, I know, right?
No,
I'm
the
still
only
good on that.
The only thing I'll jump in really quick, and it's not a budget item, I just want council members and the mayor to know since we're all on, is as you know, the military is doing its communications drills out at our airport right now, and they have several military vehicles that rolled up. And already, of course, on social media sites, they've locked us down. The occupation has begun. We put it out on the website. I think people are informed, but just in case you get those calls, it is a highly planned military communications drill that they are doing, and they will end on the 20th.
Oh, wow.
Oh, on the 20th, is this the 19th?
It is the 18th now.
18th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'll be done this week, and it just, you know, before the rumor gets out that this has anything to do with the election or anything to do with COVID lockdown or whatever, because it's already taking place. So just want everyone to remind everyone.
And, you know, I have to say too, of all of the suggestions that council has had, we talked about pretty much all of those things. We would like to do everything too. But we don't want to tax higher.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Andrew.
Guys.
Talk to
Thank
you
you. Bye.
Monday.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.